It's my immense pleasure to introduce this morning's keynote speaker, the co-founder of Twitter, a messaging network changing the way we communicate. Today we look forward to hearing how social media can change healthcare's landscape. Let's watch the video to learn more about Biz Stone.
Biz Stone is co-founder of Twitter, a messaging network changing the way we communicate. For the past decade, Mr. Stone has been working on large-scale projects that facilitate the open exchange of information, starting with social networking and blogging service Xanga in 1999. In 2003, he moved to Google, where he met and collaborated with Twitter co-founder Evan Williams. The pair would later exit the search company. Twitter was founded in 2007. Mr. Stone has published 2 books on the origins and social significance of our changing communication landscape and has lectured around the world on this subject as well as others, including creativity, opportunity, and positive global change. In 2009, Mr. Stone was added to the Time 100, an annual list of the world's most influential people. We look forward to hearing Mr. Stone's view of how social media can influence the changing healthcare landscape. Please welcome Biz Stone.
Biz Stone.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I didn't know it was that fancy.
Oh, that's great.
Wow. Before I go into my talk, I just wanted to really make sure to wholeheartedly thank Charlene and for her vision and her leadership and for putting all of this together. I got to give a quick thanks to Norris too, who helped me find my way through this whole giant place. But you know, most of all of you at HiMSS who are really using technology to improve the world, to improve humanity. That's always been my thing, is that humanity moves forward with help from technology, and it's all about the people. It's not about the technology. So what I wanted to do today, oh, here's the clicker on the ground. What I wanted to do today was I wanted to share with you 5 stories and 7 assumptions. I didn't actually want to get into the business of telling you what your business is. Instead, I wanted to keep it at sort of a high altitude and share these stories and assumptions. Some of them are actually a little bit personal, like almost like a group therapy session, if you don't mind. But I promise that at the end of them, you'll find the aphorism at the end useful, or at least you'll find the story amusing. And before I get started, I wanted to show you this picture that was taken 30 seconds after I got married to my wife. I look like the happiest guy in the world, and she looks like she just made the biggest mistake of her life. I mean, look at that body language. It's just like, what have I done? I'm like, this is great! I love my wife. I love my life. And I was trying all kinds of things to be like, what are you worried about? It's going to be great. I even dug up this quote from Ben Franklin. You know, when we talk about mistakes and errors and stuff. Ben Franklin said, perhaps the history of the errors of mankind, all things considered, is more valuable and interesting than that of their discoveries. And I think she might have bought that, because we are happily married as far as I know. And so I think that works. So if you're ever in that situation, just bust out a little Ben Franklin and you'll be fine. So the stories I want to tell, so I'll start off with the Twitter story, and I'll move on to my, personal grievances with the world and meaningful aphorisms. And then just the assumptions are really just assumptions about human nature and how to create an atmosphere of work in which people can really get the most out of themselves and out of what they're doing, and create a company that works together as a whole rather than a bunch of disparate individuals. So the first story is that of Twitter. This is a weird story. I mean, I don't even know where to begin telling the story, but I'll start somewhere. I left Google at a time when it was really silly to leave Google. I joined just before the IPO, and then they IPO'd, and then I quit, and I started this other company called Audio, and the idea there was we would democratize audio because these things called iPods were just coming out, becoming popular, and I asked my friend Evan, hey, couldn't we create can't you attach an MP3 to an RSS feed, and couldn't we make it so that people could record in their browsers and then distribute that recording to these new iPods and in effect democratize just radio? And he was like, oh my God, yes. And of course other people were calling this podcasting, and we thought we were geniuses. But and then so we started building this, and then Apple said, you know where podcasting would be good? In iTunes. And we said, yeah, that's actually a good place for it. Rather than our whole thing. So we sort of had to change things up a little bit, and Evan had this great idea. Evan was the CEO of Audio at the time. We gave the money we raised back to the investors, which was weird. We said, we're not going to do this anymore, here's your money, thank you. And Evan, who was the CEO of Audio at the time, said, just pair up, there's about 12 of us, pair up and build something you care about, build something you want to see in the world. And Jack Dorsey, an engineer we had hired at Audio, and I had become really good friends, and we were kind of building things off to the side, and he knew that I had built Zanga, which was one of the early social journaling communities, and he had long had a fascination with the heartbeat of cities. He came from writing software for dispatch for ambulances and police cars and taxi cabs and stuff. So the idea that everything had a status of where it was, and if you looked at it all together, you would get a sense of a city. Or more to the point, what we were looking at was the status message you might put on your instant messenger chat status field that says, you know, I'm grumpy, or I'm out to lunch, or I don't feel good, or I'm listening to this music. And you don't even have to talk to your friends to know what they're kind of feeling. You have this ambient awareness of and we thought that was cool, and we said, and this was end of 2005, 2006, and mobile texting, SMS, was already taking off in Europe. It was just now beginning at this point to get popular in the US. And not only that, they had allowed different carriers to allow text to go back and forth. So we said, is there something we could build in this super rudimentary technology that already is out there that would turn it into something else? And so we decided we would hook up the idea of creating a status message to SMS and allow people to just kind of broadcast what they were up to anyone who cared. People who cared would follow them. And so that's what we did. And I distinctly remember in the early days, the reason I knew that we were onto something personally was because, and you know, the problem with Audio is that we weren't using our own product. And when you're not using your own product as an entrepreneur, that's a really bad sign. Like, every time we put up a microphone between Evan and I, we kind of just stared at it. I don't know, do you have something to say? I don't know. And Twitter was something we were just very much engaged with. One of the first things that happened with me was my wife and I had just bought this tiny little 400 square foot house in Berkeley, and there was a heat wave. And I had watched enough Bob Vila as a kid that I thought I could do a little home renovation. So I started like tearing up all the carpeting. I was like, honey, there's gonna be hardwoods under this. It's gonna be great. There wasn't. And if you ever, I advise you not to tear up carpeting because they nail it down like every inch or more. And it's just really, so I'm sweating, my back is killing me, I'm ripping this up, exposing this horrible floor underneath. I'm discovering things on the rug that I don't even want to talk about anymore. I'm still scarred. And my phone buzzes in my pocket, and it's Evan. It's during this prototype phase, and his tweet says, sipping Pinot Noir after a massage in Napa Valley. And I just laughed at the incongruence of it. Like, I was laughing, and then of course my wife thought I was just going completely insane because I'm like, laughing, look at this. And she's like, okay, quit what you're doing. Anyway, I was laughing. So I was like, you know what, I'm laughing at this. This is wonderful. And we kept building it, and the main sort of critique of Twitter at the time. As it grew and as we invited our friends and family members and stuff, just a small amount of people to use it. The main critique of Twitter was, Twitter is not useful. And I remember at the time Evan Williams saying, well, neither is ice cream. Should we ban ice cream and all joy? Why can't we just keep working on this? Why is everyone, what's your problem? Like, mind your own business. And so we kept working on it because we were having a lot of fun with it. And we were experiencing little things here and there that made us see that it had a little bit of potential. But the really big thing that happened, the real sort of eye-opening potential for us was in 2007 in an event called South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, that takes place every year. South by Southwest. At that time it was predominantly a music and a film festival, and they had this part in the beginning for dorks, and that's the part we went to. And that's where you sort of network with your other Bay Area geeks, and you talk about what you're working on now and so forth. And we had enough of these kind of early adopter, geeky type folks using Twitter concentrated at this event. So this was the first time we were able to really see the product out in the wild, so to speak. And there were two things that happened that sent the proverbial tingles through my spine. The first one was, I was sitting in the audience of a lecture. They have concurrent lectures. And so I was sitting in the audience of one of these lectures, and all of a sudden, everyone just started getting up and leaving. And it was almost as if some PA system had said, all right, everyone go. But there had been no such announcement, and I realized that people were using Twitter on their mobile phones and on their laptops to communicate amongst one another silently that there was a lecture much more interesting happening across the hall. And they just all went over there. And I was like, that's incredible. And then later on that night, something even more wild happened, which was there was this guy at a pub, and he, as much as it is about the daytime conferences and all that stuff, it's really about partying on 6th Street in Austin at night and networking and everything like that. So he's at a pub, and it gets really loud and crowded at the pub. So he sends out a tweet that says, "This place is too loud and crowded. I want to go. Let's go over here to talk." And he names this other pub. And in the 8 minutes it took him to walk to that other pub, there was a line out the door. It was filled to capacity. It was totally jamming. So his plan had completely backfired. But what had happened was, his tweet was sent to his followers. His followers said, "Oh, good idea," sent it to their followers, and so on. And it allowed for 800 people to show up in one place in 8 minutes. And the thing that comes to mind for me when I think about this is the metaphor of a flock of birds moving around an object in flight. This is something that looks incredibly choreographed. It looks incredibly complicated. But the mechanics of flocking are actually very simple. It's rudimentary communication among individuals in real time that allows the many to behave almost as if they're one organism for a few seconds. And this is an amazing thing, and it was happening with people. And at that point, I said to myself, I can't think of any other tool in the world, in existence, or ever having been invented that allows people to suddenly behave as one. And yes, this was a party, but what if it had been an emergency or something more serious that allowed people to suddenly come together, swarm together as one, get something done, and then break up again. This was an amazing thing to me, and I was just stunned. And we actually went home. I think it was the next day we went back to San Francisco and formed Twitter Incorporated. And we were just, at that point, we were on our way, because once that happened, sort of word got out, and Twitter started being used, even though it was only in English, all around the world. And people were using it in places we never expected. They were using it to topple oppressive regimes. The idea. The thing for me that I think is sort of representative of the next phase of the whole web is that what we've built so far is great, and yet we're not designed for understanding a world of unlimited information. Einstein, I think it was Einstein who said, information is not knowledge. And so more information is not necessarily more knowledge. What you need to have is, you need to have understanding in there. And so the whole Arab Spring is an example of technology helping people take information and understand it and then take action. So in this case, many people in a similar predicament were able to get all this information, understand that they weren't alone in their thinking, and that they probably wouldn't be alone were they to stand up and do something about it and take action. And they were right. They were backed up. That's a dramatic example of information transmuting to understanding and then real life action coming from it. Because we have these big companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter all saying we're going to connect 7 billion people and we're going to each other into unlimited sources of information. To that I say, I believe you. Now, what does innovation look like on top of that? And I think it has something to do with being able to actually use this information, comprehend this information, and turn it into real life action, whether that's toppling oppressive regimes or losing weight, you know, anywhere in between. I'm wearing a Fitbit. This allows me to understand basically that losing weight is like a reverse paycheck. You have to spend more than you make, you know? Up till now, I was like, duh, and I put this thing on, I've lost 30 pounds. So it works. And I think that's the next phase. The true promise of the internet is to really help people. And that became sort of the mantra for me, was the idea that if Twitter was to be a triumph, then it wasn't to be a triumph of technology, it was to be a triumph of humanity. And that, I think, applies to most technology. It's just a leverage that allows people to move on. And I think the more connected we get, the more we can move as one, and the faster we can move to do these wonderful things together. So that was like the big sort of lesson I learned from working at Twitter. And now I want to show you a field of what looks like a bunch of naked men, which is what it is, but it also represents my childhood, unfortunately. But I can explain. I just need to take a drink of water first, because this is the personal therapy part. Can I have a couch? No. So this is pictures from Wikipedia, so it's legit. Don't worry about it. This is Native American Indians playing a sport called lacrosse. And I'll get all the way there. So when I was a little kid, my mom put me in this program called Boy Rangers. It wasn't Boy Scouts. It was like this weird other thing that preceded Boy Scouts. We were supposed to be, dress up like Native Americans and build our own feather headdresses, and we were supposed to advance from papoose to warrior by learning how to tie knots and doing all these things and so forth. And so I don't know why she put me in this. You know, it was a father-son thing, but my dad had gone, so it was just me, so it was extra pitiful. And my mom wouldn't sew my patches on, she just pinned them on, so I was always like, ow. Anyways, that's irrelevant. But the point is, so the whole time I'm doing Boy Rangers, which by the way I had to pay to do, I had to pay wampum. I had to take my allowance money and give it to Boy Rangers, like, what the hell? Although they did vote me chief of the Blackfoot tribe, and they gave me a special Indian name, Owl Bear, because I was wise like an owl and strong like a bear. So, you're talking to Owl Bear, investment partner. I own this casino. No. So the point is, I was doing Boy Rangers the whole time. All the other kids my age were doing like Pee-wee football and Little League and soccer and all these other things. So when I got to high school, I really wanted, I thought to myself, I should join a sports team, because that seems like a really good way to get involved in this high school community. And so I was like, okay, so I'll go to the tryouts. And I went to the basketball tryout and the football tryout and all this stuff, and I was just completely bewildered by the lines on the court. I was like, am I supposed to know what all these things are? I have no idea. Like, I was just stunned. And forget about baseball. It was like this crazy religion with all the rules and stuff. And so I was just so, like, confused. And I was pretty naturally athletic, but I just held back because I didn't want to, like, embarrass myself. And so what coach is going to, like, put the kid on the team and was like, I don't want to, I'm good. I'll just stand here. So what I did was I did some research, and I found out there was a sport that the school didn't support, and that sport was lacrosse. So I went to the administration, and I said, if I get enough boys and a coach, can I start a lacrosse team? And they were like, yes, okay. And, but I did. I found a lacrosse coach, and I got a bunch of guys together, and we formed a lacrosse team, and we were really good at lacrosse, and I became the captain of the lacrosse team, and like I was the top goal scorer, and we were actually a very good team. The whole thinking behind that was, if nobody knew how to play lacrosse, then we were all clueless, and I didn't have to be worried, I guess I could have just learned how to play basketball, but I don't know why I did it this way. Anyways, the point is, I was able to sort of found this lacrosse team, so the lesson I took away from that, and that I still think is incredibly useful today, is that opportunity can be manufactured. A lot of people think of opportunity as something that, a series of different events and things that have to come together at just the right time for you to take hold of them. But you can actually manufacture each of those little things yourself, and then you take hold of them. So you can actually create or manufacture your own opportunities. That's what I did there, and then I realized later that's something that you can do in the business world, in the entrepreneurial world, in the management world, in any field. And it's so simple, but you don't think of it that way. You always think of opportunity as coming along, whereas you can actually create it. So I still sort of live by that to this day. After high school, I went to college, and I didn't really like it because I got to college and I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And they're like, no, we tell you what to do. And I was like, no, that's not how I do it. I do my own stuff. And so I was kind of butting heads with folks at college, and I got this great Chancellor Scholarship for Excellence in the Arts, where they paid me to go to college. It was a pretty good deal. But I also got a side job moving these heavy boxes from the attic to the lobby of this publishing company called Little Brown and Company on Beacon Hill in Boston, Massachusetts. And this was at a time when the art department there, the department that did all the book cover designs and stuff, was just switching over from like stat machines and spray glue and INT transfers and all these sort of old school graphic design techniques to Macs and to desktop publishing and all this stuff. And I had been fortunate to get involved in that really early. My friend Mark had a Mac when we were growing up, and I was all up in there. And so when one day when the art department all went to lunch at the same time, I snuck onto one of the workstations. I found a cover that hadn't been designed yet, and just the transmittal that says, here's the title, the subtitle, here's what we want it to kind of look like. And I designed it, I printed it, I matted it up, and I slipped it in with the other covers to go off for approval in New York City editorial and sales. And then I went back to the boxes. And when the art director came back, he held up the cover and he said, who designed this cover? Because it got chosen. And I said, me. And he said, the Box Kid. And it was actually really great because I was 19, and he said, how'd you like to work here? How'd you like to have a job as a book cover designer? And I thought, well, people finish college so they can get a job like this. And also, the other thing I thought about it was, he was this older art director. He had no clue how to use the computer, and I thought, this is good, because he needs me to show him how to use the computer. I can learn a ton from him, because he's been doing this for 30 years. So I basically apprenticed. I took the job, and the first day I went into work, I went over to his desk, walked up to him, he didn't say a word. He said, come here. He beckoned me over, and he reached behind him, and he took out this book of color swatches, and he leafed through to the page and had like the orange, the browns and the kind of the mocha-y colors. And he tore one of these little sample chips out and put it down, and with one finger he slid it across his desk, and he said, "That's how I take my coffee." Dropped out of college for this. This is going to be terrible. And he was like, "I'm kidding, I'm joking." But I think that would have been a great test. He should have made me go to Dunkin' Donuts and seen if I could have got the lady to like match the colors. It would have been a really good like real world test for me. Anyways, the point is, I then apprenticed with this guy, Steve Snyder. He's still a creative director in New York City now. And I apprenticed with him, like the lost art of apprenticeship. I asked him everything. I mean, I didn't just learn about graphic design. I asked him, when did you know when it was time to marry your wife? And how much did you ask for your first job? And he was like, what do you ask me all these questions? Like, because you know him, I don't know anything. And we became really good friends. And studying graphic design is just, I think it's something that anyone in any field, if they have a chance to study it, should, because what it taught me and what I took away from it was very important, and that was that creativity is a renewable resource. You'll never run out of it. You can always try something different. You can always take a new approach to anything. If that beautiful cover isn't the right cover for the editorial or the salespeople, there's another beautiful cover you can do. There's endless ones. And you can imagine this being applied to any challenge in any industry, and that's what we do. Like whenever I'm starting a company or working somewhere, I always encourage people to understand and realize that their creativity is infinite. Everyone has it, and you can always sort of refresh it. Just go to the bookstore, look at some cool stuff, get some ideas. It's infinitely renewable. It's great. And when you think about it this way, then challenges aren't problems. They're fun puzzles to solve, and it just totally changes the nature of work. After I studied design with Steve, I went off on my own and I expanded my I learned web design, and I expanded my freelance operation, and I started doing a bunch of websites, and that's how I ended up starting my first company. But the next story I'm going to tell here, it's not my story. That's not me standing on a bridge with wings. This is a story from a German movie from the 90s, a Wim Wenders movie about these two immortal angels whose job it is to just watch over Berlin and make sure things go right. I guess it's a black and white movie, and it's pretty artsy. Don't watch the remake with Nick Cage. That's not good at all. But if you see this movie, the particular story I want to tell from it is there's these two immortals, and one of them falls in love with this lonely trapeze artist. She can't see him. No one can see them. They live forever. No one can see them. He falls in love with this lonely trapeze artist, and he really longs for what it would feel like to hold, a hot cup of coffee in his hands, or to taste food, or to kiss this woman, and just lonely trapeze artist. Really, like I said, an art film. But so he tells his buddy, Infinite, immortal guy, I'm thinking of renouncing my immortality and just falling to earth as a mortal man. He's like, are you crazy? Then you'll just die. You'll eventually die. And he's like, I know, but I want these things. I want to experience these things more than anything. So he renounces his immortality, falls to earth. Luckily, he falls to earth with some golden armor, which he can pawn for a suit. I think they just wrote that in, but anyways. And then, he ends up doing all those things he wanted to do, and he does eventually at the end, like sort of lock eyes with this woman, and it's as if they've known each other forever, and it ends with them like coming together, and it's a happy story or whatever. But the lesson that I often share with young entrepreneurs about this film, and encourage them to watch this film, is basically that to succeed spectacularly, you also need to be willing to fail spectacularly. You can't sort of have it both ways and hedge and, well, I could get this job on the side, but I also have this startup. That way, if this doesn't work out, I can always do that. you know, you just have to completely be willing to die, basically, figuratively, in order to get what you really want. You have to just completely make the plunge. Otherwise, you'll be sorry forever because you didn't give it everything you had, and it's really the only way. So you really need to be willing to fail just completely, spectacularly, horribly, if you want the reverse to be true. And so that's what I took away from that film. I watched it in high school, so I haven't seen it since. Maybe I've completely perverted the story, but for this purpose, that's my aphorism. So there's one more story that I want to share about helping other people. When I was a kid, I always thought, you know, helping other people was just being a good person. It was the right thing to do. It's something you were supposed to do. So if somebody's collecting money for, you know, poverty or something, you're supposed to give them a little bit of money, but you never expect someone to email you and say, thanks for the $2, hunger's done, we fixed it, you know, like, it just seemed like, you know, helping these giant issues was unsolvable. And I started working with the Product Red people a few years ago, and when I learned more about their operation, and I learned more about what's going on with HIV in Africa and so forth, and then when they told me about this this thing they call the Lazarus effect, where 2 pills a day over the course of between 30 and 90 days can basically take someone from death's door to totally healthy, awesome, plump. This is the same kid. This picture is the same kid after taking the pills for like, you know, a couple months. And this is a kid, and the pills are like 40 cents a day. But what really blew me away was that when at a certain scale, when they can give these pills regularly to the mothers stop having HIV babies, the fathers get well, the disease is not spread as much, but more importantly, people can go back to work, go back to being moms, go back to school, and what happens is, over a certain period of time, an entire geoeconomic region is renewed and sort of brought back to life. It's not just the people, it's the entire geoeconomic region, and then they move on to the next region and they do it again. And so I developed this idea in my head, and the idea is that there is compound interest in altruism. The earlier you get started, just like if you were to put money into a bank account with compound interest, the more impact you're going to have over time. So I always encourage people to just get involved in something now, especially with startups. Start immediately aligning your small company with a cause, because don't wait until you have billions of dollars and then throw money at a problem. Align yourselves early, volunteer, whatever it is, and over a certain amount of time, which you could have been like wasting, you will have had an enormous impact. And that's just something that really blew my mind when I realized that if we all start thinking this way, and we start having this kind of, if we get in touch with our empathy, and we realize that we all have it and that we can all put ourselves in other people's shoes, we can sort of, like I was talking about the flock of birds, we can move together and we can dramatically impact, and we can have actual global real world change, which is just something that really just fascinated me when I learned it. Okay, so I want to leave time for questions, and I don't know how long I've been going on, so I want to sort of speed through. These are 7 assumptions that I make employees of mine sit through. The idea being that you're not supposed to assume. You know, my mom always said, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And the trouble is, people make assumptions all the time, whether you're not supposed to, and they do it anyways. You know, people, especially in big companies, people have anxiety, they have fears about people that they don't know, and etc. So we say, look, you're gonna make assumptions, make these assumptions. Assume that we can change the world, we can build a business, and we can have fun, and those are the 3 necessary ingredients for success. A lot of companies will say 2 of those are good enough, but we say you have to have all 3. You have to build a business that's making money, you have to have a positive impact on the world, and you have to love what you're doing. And if you don't have all 3 of those things, then you're not successful. Quickly, moving on to the next assumption. We don't always know what's going to happen. That's just something that we learned over time. Leave space for the unknown because something really cool could happen. Another assumption is that there's a creative answer to every problem. That kind of goes back to the idea of creativity as a renewable resource. Another big thing that's easy to forget, there are more smart people outside your company than there are inside, especially if you're a small startup. It's like, if you have a problem or need a question answered, go ask somebody else. Like, you don't, not just these 30 people. I mean, come on, right? Another thing is kind of a Silicon Valley normal thing, but we will win if we always do the right thing for our users. I think that the same is true. Like, if you just keep your eye on the ball and remember who you're taking care of and who you're supporting, and do the right thing by them, then your whole company will be doing the right thing. I also think that doing business is just like real relationships. If you're getting more out of that relationship than the other person, that relationship isn't going to last very long. So make sure that when you do business with somebody else, that it's fair on both sides. And finally, I think, people have natural fear and anxiety about things that they don't know, and people they don't know. So they don't know Phil in marketing. Phil in marketing said, this is my plan for 2013, and then when you see his plan, it didn't come out quite like he wanted. And you think, well, Phil's a jackass. But guess what Phil thinks of your plan, So make this, assume that your coworkers are all smart and that they have great intentions, and go over and introduce